Is your personal finance strategy up to date? We'll get advice on financial planning following reforms in student loan repayment, home mortgages, and more next on Black Issues Forum.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.
Hello and welcome to Black Issues Forum. I'm Deborah Holt-Noel. It's not uncommon to take inventory of your personal look every few years, throw out the old, and incorporate a few new things to keep your image fresh. The same principle applies to your financial profile. What worked 10 or 20 years ago may not be the best fit for you today, especially considering periodic financial reforms and changes in the economy. So today we have with us experts in financial planning with advice fit for the current climate. I'd like to introduce Andrea Harris, president of the North Carolina Institute of Minority Economic Development. Also with NCIMED, Iman-N-Lah S. Rasheed, credit analyst and college coordinator and certified wealth coach for NC Saves. And we have Lori Jones Gibbs, president of Yes Enterprises. Ladies, thank you so much for coming out. And I knew I was going to do that with your name, Iman, so please accept my apologies. I'd like to kind of start off taking a look at the profile of the African-American spender. And there was recently a poll or report out by Nielsen and NNPA that stated that by the year 2015, Black spending power will have increased to the $1.1 trillion mark. And my question, I'd like to get the feedback from all three of you, is that an indication of true African-American consumer power, especially considering the debt load? And what are we spending our money on? Andrea, let me start with you.
Well, I'll say first that's true. There is a projection that the consumer spending, after-tax consumer spending, will reach $1 trillion by 2015. But we cannot get confused consumer spending and wealth. So on one hand, consumer spending, when you look at the African-American community, the majority of our after-tax consumer spending still goes to basic necessities of housing and food, transportation, apparel. Like, there's very little discretionary spending inside of that. There is some, but there's some discretionary, very little discretionary spending. So after-tax consumer spending is totally different from wealth. So if we were talking about what do people have in terms of actual net worth, once you look at whatever that income or those savings or the house, whatever values they have, minus their liabilities, what's left, that's a totally different story, because that's a little around $3,000 as compared with $120,000 for white America. So we try to make sure that people don't get confused about consumer spending, but we do have some opportunities inside that. One of the things I would say to start out with is we do every 3 or 4 years the same kind of report on after-tax consumer spending. Some people could go to our website, to the Institute's website, and see what that is for racial and ethnic groups in North Carolina, well, disaggregated by race and ethnicity, and also see it by county. So you'll see how it's still growing across the state of North Carolina, but the population is also growing.
Is it surprising, Lori, that spending continues to increase, even though the population is increasing as well, in the midst of this very difficult economic time?
I think spending for necessities is always going to be something that happens. But as Andrea says, I think where we lose out on the wealth. The housing crisis has sincerely impacted people of color, and especially African Americans. We have been the largest number who have lost our homes. Thus, that was the one tool that we use to help educate our children and to help start businesses. So if you take out the equity that was once owned by African Americans. And you listen to the numbers that Andrea says, where whites' wealth is 120% and black wealth is about $3,000. 80% of black wealth were tied to equity in our homes. So spending on necessities we will always do, but how are we going to recover the loss of wealth?
And I think a lot of people are considering going back to school to get the education that's needed to perhaps pursue positions that would be more lucrative. And Iman, I'd like to get your comment on this, because as we're looking at consumer spending, how much of that is dedicated to educational costs and loans?
Well, we're finding that student debt numbers are at an all-time high. I think right now we're looking at about 36 million individuals that have student loan debt of some sort as we speak. So my position on that is that there are a lot of individuals, young and old, that are now considering furthering their education, but they always run into a stumbling block when it comes to cost. And so that kind of puts you in between a rock and a hard place, because on one hand you want to, get the education so that you can move forward, so that you can build wealth for yourself and your family. But then on the other end, you're adding the costs and more debt that in turn may, start a downward spiral there as well. So,
Lori, how do you advise individuals who may be coming, through perhaps your organization? Tell us what your organization, YES, stands for, and what kind of advice do you have for folks?
Well, YES stands for Your Everyday Success. I think we have to all define what success means to us. And to answer your question specifically, as it relates to going back to school and finding careers, I think you have to map out what are the careers that are the hot jobs. I think the whole green opportunities, we as a people have got to seriously look at what are the green job opportunities. The government is putting a lot of money in it, and how are we going to remake ourselves? We may have to remake ourselves through trades. You're always going to need an electrician. You're always going to need a plumber. But find the skills and the trades that are going to help you make a decent living, and then pursue those.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point, that I think you will start seeing a boom in community colleges and trade schools because of that reason, as Lori said, because of the trades and the hot jobs, that you're almost guaranteed to at least get some type of return on your investment for school. So.
Yeah, but I want to also say that, we have to look at, see, the way you weigh the, this challenge of having the student debt, and then also what's that value of that degree. So while we on one hand see more and more people going to community colleges because of cost, on the other hand, we'd like to say to folks that at every level of a degree, from an associate's degree to a bachelor's degree will add $1.5 million to your life earnings in the workplace. If you get a master's degree, that's another $500,000 or $600,000 over your work life. You get a PhD, so you have to weigh that. So on one hand, yes, you got this additional cost, but yes, at the same time, it also increases your earnings.
Well, when you're talking about graduate school costs of, say, $100,000,
yeah,
and the payoff being over a lifetime, just $600,000.
Yeah, I would say to you that, that's what the awakening was for me, that we had some young people in our office for a period of maybe 2 years that had MBAs from some of the largest schools around the country. And when they started talking with us about how much student debt they had, $60,000, $70,000, $100,000, part of that gets into be about also how do you manage and pay that debt. And I think one of the things now may be a new initiative that has come out of this administration around handling student debt, which would allow you to maybe have some other options. Am I right?
The loan forgiveness. Are you talking about the loan forgiveness?
No, the new Obama's administration just passed, or was trying to put something in place for 2012 to help borrowers that have student loans. And so one of those I think that she was getting to was that you can now, or that he's trying to work it out, where 10% only of your income would be what you would have to pay for your student loan in terms of payment. Another one coming through that is that you'll be able to consolidate your loans and at a lower interest rate. Right. So in turn would make your payments lower and your time to pay them off that would decrease. And then the last is it's escaped me. The last is that before you even decide and sign at the college that you are looking to attend, they're going to bring you in and you can map out, you know, what that cost would be and what you're looking like on the front end before you even determine if this is where I want to go. So it'll be a little bit more clear on the front end as to
Now
what you're getting into.
This is something that's coming in the future, but currently there's a loan repayment forgiveness policy in effect that allows, it involves service work.
Right, if you work in certain spaces, so if you work in the nonprofit sector, or if you're in doing certain public sector work, but that allows you to have the interest forgiven if you make your payments without missing a payment on a regular basis every month for 10 years. Then at that point, it's forgiven. I think one of the other challenges we have in this kind of down economy with such high unemployment is that a lot of people, this is one thing people don't like to talk about, a lot of people are going to school to get the loan. And so they go to school, and they may well go to a community college because they don't have the housing costs, so they go to school, they get this loan, and they take the maximum allowable, so they get what we call the net loan proceeds, not a refund. So Iman-N-Lah really works really hard to get young people to understand that what you get back generally is not a refund. A refund is when you overpay. This is your net loan check. And they're living off of that because it may well give some individuals, if they're walking away with $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 in a semester, it may be more take home than they've taken home if they had a low wage job from which they've now been displaced.
But it's still debt.
But it's debt,
that
and
has
so
to be
it's
paid
right,
back.
it has to be paid back. So it really, really, really deepens the poverty longer term. You know, when we look at what's the overall impact that this could potentially have, we're talking about having such deep poverty in America now. We're talking about now putting a whole different generation of people in poverty for a much longer period of time.
So there's definitely some specific advice, and it's probably individually based with regard to pursuing additional education and getting into additional debt. And there is the additional policy now, the student loan forgiveness plan from the Obama administration. I'd like to get on to talking a little bit about the primary vehicle for building wealth, which is homeownership. And now there are so many people who are not able to get that loan. There were so many great programs about 10 years ago, but what's going on right now, Lori, to help people to build wealth? Is that still a good way to try to acquire wealth?
I think homeownership is still a very excellent way to acquire wealth. I think what the industry learned is that it went too far on one extreme. When you don't verify a person's income, when you don't verify that they have the ability to make down payment, when you don't verify that they have the ability to make the payment, then you do the consumer no justification. What's happening now in the industry is called full documentation, which means when the consumer comes to apply for a mortgage, we're going to verify their income, we're going to verify their job, we're going to make sure, more importantly, that they can afford the mortgage that they're taking on. Why is this a great time to buy? The house you couldn't buy 3 years ago, you can afford now. Let's look at the upside of this downside. There were many homes that were overpriced because the bubble just kept blowing, building, and now it busts. And once it busts, prices have been suppressed because there's a large number of foreclosures. We need to get those foreclosures out of the system. And one way to try to prevent future foreclosures is making sure we put people in homes that they can afford. We will go back to the traditional 2 to 3% equity growth a year. It made no sense if you bought a home in January in 2006, and when you went to refinance it in June, you bought it in January for $150,000, but in June now it was worth $200,000. No. Clearly, we should have known better as an industry.
So is there anything out there now to help people qualify for that mortgage so that they can become homeowners? Because we're still grappling with the foreclosures, and even though they're cycling out, the restrictions or the requirements for securing a mortgage are so much tougher now.
They are, but I think there's still plenty of money out there, and lenders are still lending. And I think also so many people are thinking that they can't get a loan that they can. There are some places through FHA loan, You get a loan with a 620 credit score. Now, some people would say that's a low credit score. But historically, when loans were done at 620 and they were fully documented, those loans performed. What happened was the lack of doing the due diligence from underwriting. It was underwriting failures that led to the housing debacle. The consumer depends on the lender to say, yes, I qualify. As a human being, I might want $1 million house because it looks nicer than my $300,000 house. But if I can't qualify for it, I should be told, well, no, Lori, you need to go back and start over. Again, with the new underwriting guidelines, we just went back to the future. I like to call it going back to the future. We've done this before. We've learned from the mistakes. So when you go to apply for a mortgage now, bring your pay stubs, bring your tax returns, make sure you have 3%, at least 3% of your own money to put in the property. And if you have certain incomes, there's still down payment assistance programs. But please buy. And this is the time to buy.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about saving and even spending for health care. A lot of families find themselves strapped because they're trying to pay for insurance for health care. When you have to make that decision as a household leader, what kinds of priorities do you need to put into place, or what kinds of things do you need to keep in mind as you place your priorities for spending? You got to have health care, especially if you've got a family. And I'd like to address this question to you, Iman.
Well, I think one of the main things everyone needs to do is just sit down and make a budget. I mean, see what you have coming in and, you know, what you have going out, and then that way you can kind of determine where to start. I do agree that health care is at the top of the list, but as you know, and especially in our community, that's one of the first things that we let go. We would rather, and, you know, it's the right thing to do. We would rather keep a roof over our head. You know, we need food, the baby needs clothes, the baby needs shoes, but the baby also needs health care. The mom, the caregiver, also needs health care. But I would just say that if we look at or get creative in terms of how we're saving and how we can put money aside with little things that we do and pay attention to those small things, then we will be able to somehow figure out how we can incorporate and keep health care in our households versus, again, letting it be one of the first things that we have that slips away.
Has the Obamacare, you know, which is what they're calling it, actually helped, or has it had time to do what it needs to do, Andrea?
I'm not sure it's had time to do what it needs to do yet, and I'm not sure that we really are clear about all of what it's supposed to do and what it's not supposed to do. And there's been so much spin, you know, positively and negatively, but I don't think it's had the time yet. What we do know is that the cost of health care continues to go up. So what we see happening more and more is that in the workplace, people are making decisions about where they work, not so much now on the basis of what the salary is, but they're making it on the basis of fringe benefits. Will I have health care? How much will that health care cost me? Well, is it going to be more affordable? Because in the long run, that might be of greater benefit than what that salary is. So you're seeing more and more and more of that. You're seeing employers also placing more value on fringe benefits and on health care, and on the cost, whether they can provide it to the employees, and maybe sacrificing whether or not there's going to be a bonus or something else, or even an increase in the salary, just to assure that they can continue to make this affordable, because the cost is continuing. We just cannot afford the continuing rise in cost of health care. And then for my generation, we're not necessarily helping you.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. And so, you know, it's a big burden for younger people, but in large measure, as this population ages, the cost of health care will continue to go up. So we have to find some other ways to address this cost. And so as people talk about managed care and patient-centered care, then we have to pay attention to that. We got more people dealing with who are part of the sandwich generation. They probably around you all's age as opposed to mine, but they're taking care of parents as well as taking care of their own children.
I think, and the idea of actually downsizing is something brand new, particularly I would say to African American families, because the idea had always been, you know, you're going to have a big house and everybody's going to come and stay and visit and that kind of thing. But more and more, it might be that families need to consider going on into that living facility.
Well, I agree with that. I think that but also I think that Laurie heard me say this, that there's an opportunity inside adversity and these kind of challenging economic times is an opportunity for us to think more creatively about how do we deal with this issue. So yes, some people might need to be in retirement communities, assisted living facilities, whatever, depending upon their health. But also maybe we need a new kind of housing. So if you look at how houses are designed, maybe we need to figure out how we make houses more suitable or appropriate for an aging population.
For intergenerational
that's the intergenerational populations, as well as, since this silver tsunami baby boomer generation is living longer, maybe we need to have Golden Girls types of housing that has different types of suites that allows people to live together but have some independence at the same time, but manage the cost because they're pooling their resources. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out here for us, and I think you're going to see a lot of that come out with people that have the entrepreneurial spirit like Laurie over here.
Job opportunities in green industries, in construction, in architecture.
But let me say, green is also saving. Green is not just what we always think of, let's go build something new. Green is, in terms of the consumer side of it, how do I save with the new light bulbs? How do I change how I am living to make sure I'm in a healthier workspace, a healthier living space, but more affordably. So there's a lot of conservation there as well.
And while you're talking about saving, I don't want to get out of this conversation without talking about where savings falls in this economy, and with people needing to have provision for health care, have provision for everyday living expenses, for education. So where are you supposed to save? And with the return on saving that's provided at banks, is that really benefiting a person who's got debt?
I think that's an excellent question, and I will say that you always should save, but you should never save if you're paying 21% on a credit card.
I agree.
You have to choose. You have to choose what's most important. I generally say to people when they ask me about savings in a budget, I try to work with a very simple budget. I call it the 10-10-20-60 rule. 10% tithe and offering, 10% personal savings, 20% for fun and wants, and then 60% for all your necessities. Now that's a nice idea to have if you can have it, okay? And when the economy's back and you're gainfully employed, you need to start disciplining yourself. I'm Baptist, so we believe in tithing. So you give your 10% to the church. Don't worry about the pastor. You're giving it to keep the facility. You're giving it to keep the lights on and keep all the ministries running. And then you need to pay yourself 10%. Because if you start paying yourself, you'll get into the habit of paying yourself. I'll never tell people not to have fun. But if you have a $200 budget, you only have $20. And if you go to the movies, you only shot that on Friday night. So you might need to go to the Red Box and get the $199 movie. And then 60%. You have housing expenses. You got to care for your children. You have to gas up your car. I just use that as a parameters. Savings is a must. A lot of people can't do it right now, but think about how you can save. If you have $5,000 right now in the bank that's paying you 0.1%, and you have an outstanding credit card with a $3,000 balance, and you're being charged upwards of 21% or greater, you might need to sacrifice and take that $3,000 out of that bank and leave $2,000 in and pay off that 21% credit card, because in essence now you saved yourself 21%.
Right. If you look at that kind of credit card situation, 9 times out of 10, you know, since they have to disclose it, then the bill will say something like it takes X amount of time for you to pay this off. And anytime you get a bill that says it's going to take you 200, 300 years, 2, 3, 4 lifetimes to pay it off, you know, it's time for you to do something to get rid of this. Even if you pay a little more, I don't care if it's $5 or $10, whatever you can every month. And as Laurie said, on the savings side, we see more Americans saving today than ever before. More people in our community saving today than ever before.
And tax protection vehicles might be another way.
That's exactly right. Tax protection vehicles out here now, just all types of little things that are available for small business owners that we need to make sure we try to find out about so we can take full advantage of it, but also put something away and structure it so you don't see it.
Right.
So, you know, have it come out, you know, have it drafted, have it whatever, and put somewhere so that you're not having to make that extra effort every month to do it, so you won't have to give thought to whether or not you are or are not going to do it. But we gotta save, and we must find some ways to just be more prepared for the unexpected. We gotta find ways to build wealth as well.
And I know
wealth.
that both of you all have, through your enterprises, opportunities to meet with people and have consultants. So we'll have information on our website for people to get in touch with NC-Iman and also yours. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to cut it right there,
I was
Lori.
gonna say people need to expect the expected. Because you expect your birthday every year, you expect Mother's Day, you expect Valentine's, you expect Thanksgiving, things that you do on a normal basis. Plan for them. Everybody always use the unexpected. Well, start planning for the expected.
Right.
Wonderful. Good advice. And for more information or to get in touch with today's guests, please visit us online at unctv.org/BIF, and you'll find links to email us your comments and join us as Fans of BIF on Facebook. And we'd like to thank you for joining us. Please be sure to meet us right back here each Sunday afternoon at 4:30 for Black Issues Forum. I'm Deborah Holt-Noel. Thank you for spending your time with us.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.